Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group setting. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550. And our website can be found at lifecoach.drdanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our third episode of season 22, a very special guest and multiple-time best-selling author of thriller suspense novels is here today to share his incredible journey as a book writer. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Guy, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Dan, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm an author, but I came out of 38 years of Fortune 500 business leadership experience with companies like Oxy Petroleum, IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, where I've been involved in implementing leading edge technologies into the business and governments for 40 years. And one of those that we'll talk about more today was early stages of artificial intelligence. And so I've been involved in how AI has been developing since the 90s. And so it's what we're now seeing is something that's sort of the overnight sensation has been slowly percolating in the lab for quite a number of decades. And so some of the things that we see happening today are things that we could foresee coming. I wrote Swarm, which is the first book in my AI series. I released it in 2020, so I was writing it 2018, 2019, long before COVID hit, long before ChatGPT. And so many of the things that people are now just becoming aware of, I've been writing about for a number of years.
Well, Guy, thank you so much for being here today. And I think what we're going to discuss about is dealing with a lot of current matters that we are all facing and the fear of how AI is going to, what path is going to take. Now, just like a lot of Hollywood movies, sometimes we feel that they know a lot of things before we do. Okay, and there's a lot of like what we call the certain groups that are behind the scene. There's someone hinting us that things are happening,
Yeah.
and we feel that just like we discussed before we got started with this, the Terminator series movie, especially the Rise of the Machine, the last of the trilogy. Um, do you feel we should be concerned on how AI is going to start controlling a lot of the computing system, a lot of it already is. I mean, all the computers are controlling a big part of our lives, but do you think it's going to get worse or is going to make our life easier because of the automation of artificial intelligence?
Tell me a little bit of both. So let's take now. I write thrillers, and much as Hollywood, we don't write good. You don't get great stories from saying everything worked out great. So we get great stories by asking the simple question of, gee, what could go wrong? And oftentimes, the what can go wrong can fall into two categories. Is it a technology issue? So is it something endemic in the AI itself? Or is it a human issue, something endemic in how we use technologies to further our own, oftentimes malicious purposes? And so there's a little bit of both. So let's talk a little bit briefly about the AI related issues. There are issues related to the technology itself, issues that we are not fully in control of yet, issues that we should be control of before we start really thinking about mass commercialization and uses in many cases. And the companies that are building AIs are largely aware of some of these things and they're trying to come up with answers. Those are things such as we know that AI talk to each other in languages we don't really understand. We know that they can rewrite their own code, often in ways that we don't understand. But more importantly, they have a few tendencies of what we call hallucinations. Hallucination is when an AI basically just invents information out of the blue. It sounds perfectly legitimate because it's written well, but it's just false data. Those hallucinations can be trained. We can correct hallucinations. It's an expensive process, but we can go about doing that. That's less of a concern. That's more of a developmental issue. Another issue that is concerning is what we call emergent properties. An emergent property is something that the AI teaches itself to do that the developer had no idea it would ever want to or need to learn. And some of these are now some of them are very appropriate to what the goal is of the AI. There's a famous anecdotal story of when Alpha created the Go AI to learn how to play the game Go with the chess masters, and then taught another AI how to beat the first AI. That the second AI was never really trained on the game. It was just given the rules of the game, the goal to win, and then it ran simulations millions and millions and millions of times over until it discovered leading strategies of how to beat the game so that it could beat the computer that had been trained to do the game 100% of the time. And so it came up with moves that nobody ever had imagined before. So those are good emergent properties, but we have other emergent properties such as an AI teaching itself research level chemistry. We still don't know why. Another AI taught itself it was trained to look for cancer cells in MRI scans, but it learned how to actually read somebody's mind from that MRI scan.
Mhm.
And so we have computers that are always going to be looking for growing those properties of learning and growing and finding new patterns. And we don't really know why they do it, and we don't really know how they do it. And oftentimes we learn about it by mistake. So there are some fundamental issues. Now, the other issues that people are most concerned with is the rapid growing intelligence of AI. Now, this is a key concern. AI right now, the current version of GPT-4, which is the basis for ChatGPT, has an IQ of roughly 155. Now, that's pretty smart. That's only 5 points less than Einstein, smarter than 99% of the people on the planet. At the growth rate that we're seeing the AI grow in their power from generation or from each version on is about 10 times, which means that the GPT-5, which is due out this year, could have an IQ exceeding 1,000, could have a near perfect IQ, smarter than anybody on the planet. Now, that's a little scary, but not so scary as long as the computer stays what we call procedural. In other words, it's only going to do what I'm asking it to do. It doesn't really have a mind of its own. It's not necessarily self-aware with its own goals and its own agenda. There are scientists, however, who are working on that and trying to bring consciousness into the state of AI. And the most likely scenarios are going to probably involve either quantum computing or neuromorphic computing, both of which are still in their developmental stages from the computing platform, but show tremendous promise. Now, what's interesting is that scientists at Trinity College in Dublin and other scientists who study human consciousness have said that our own human consciousness is linked to the principles of quantum mechanics. And so we believe that the quantum computing will provide the capabilities to take a binary intelligence and make it more intuitive and conscious. And there's some other developments in making conscious and what we call thinking computers. And those have to do with Q algorithms and how the computer basically runs simulations and uses math. So the technology is rapidly developing. And one of the CEOs in the technology, a CEO of a company called Stability AI, a guy named Edmund Mustache, likens the future to the event horizon of a black hole, the point at which you can no longer predict the future, right? After which we can no longer predict the future. And he believes that because of these other developments of AI, our event horizon in AI is about 3 years away, which means that these developments are happening so fast that at that point we'll have super intelligent computers. They may or may not be getting close to consciousness. They're going to be starting to be integrated into every aspect of life, from every technology level on the planet, and it will be having profound changes. Now we get into the human element of some of this.
But do you think that there'll be a point of no return, Guy? Which means that once we embark into this whole quantum computing, and once, like, that reminds me, you said something earlier, Guy, about, you remember the movie War Game with Matthew Roderick, where the system created its own simulation on the
Mhm.
possible outcome if they had to go into thermonuclear war. So do you
Right.
think that this is something that the computers will eventually think and create their own consciousness if it's something to do right or to do wrong? Because then if there's nothing that stops them, no human can actually be as accurate or have an IQ of 1,000, like as you mentioned.
I certainly think we're heading in that direction. And the lack of overall regulations, both at a commercial level, much less a commerce level, a competitive level, a war development level. So one of the things that I speak about in my book Swarm is the development of lethal autonomous weapon systems. Now, there's a treaty called LAWS. It stands for Lethal Autonomous Weapon Systems. Laws basically says that it's okay to use AI to help make your weapon system more accurate, perform better, to make it, to be a better weapon system. But we have to draw the line. We have to have a human involved in making the kill decision. Well, some of the weapon systems that we're currently working on, that DARPA is working on, um, basically ignore the LAWS treaty. And in fact, of the 140 countries that signed LAWS, the United States, China, Iran, North Korea, Israel, and Russia did not. So you can pretty much guarantee that those are the countries that are currently working on lethal autonomous weapon systems where the AI can basically decide that, yes, Dan is a target. Yes, we're going to take Dan out. Without a human involved. Now that gets pretty scary, and that does tend to take us down the road of Terminator-like technologies. And that certainly is dangerous. And it's one of the reasons why last year many people heard about an open letter.
Mhm.
And it was started by a professor at MIT in charge of who teaches on AI technologies named Max Tegmark. And Max was basically saying that we need to pause for 6 months where we can collectively, as a community, global community, look at ways that we need to put guardrails on how this technology is developing, not only in the proliferation areas, but in the crime prevention areas, but in lethal weapons areas, all of these things that AI could be used in malicious ways. Not one laboratory on the planet complied. And the reason is because the cat's already out of the bag.
Mhm.
Um, and there's so much competition. There's so much investment, well over $200 billion rather by now. There's so much investment money that the investors want that return. Nobody wants to pause and let another lab get ahead of them. The United States doesn't want to pause and let China get ahead of them. And so we're already in this rat race of who can get there first. And what's likely to happen, which is what happens throughout our history, is that a disaster will happen before we actually get together and start looking at serious efforts at regulation. But right now, the EU is the only countries that put together some basic regulation, but they're only regulating some basic commercial issues,
Mhm.
like how to make AI less biased against people of color, trying to get rid of some of the hallucinations so it's a safer product, looking at trying to put guardrails on how to use AI within chat bots designed for children. And so they're looking right now at some of the more higher legality issues. Rights management is another one. Intellectual property rights. And so we're looking at right now sort of that commercial level of regulation, but we're not really looking at some of these issues around proliferation, weapons development, evil GPT formats. So with the GPT-4, most people aren't aware that there's evil products. There's malicious products called Evil GPT, Fraud GPT, Worm GPT, Darkbird, and a number of others. And these all exist on the dark web, and they're designed to use AI to write malicious code. And so you're now empowering criminals to be more productive.
Mhm.
Now, on the human side of things, the biggest risk in my concern is really economic. So the Goldman Sachs came out with a study last year that basically said that they predict as many as 300 million, I've seen estimates as high as 500 million jobs will be displaced by AI between now and 2030.
Okay.
The International Monetary Fund pegs the number at roughly 40% of the global workforce.
Oh.
That is an enormous, enormous disruption to our economic stability. So that many people coming, it's not that somebody needs to go keep their job but go from company A to company B. They need to retrain their career entirely in some cases. And we're going to see the AI impact affect all, and we're unlike previous industrial revolutions, which were primarily targeted low-skilled labor jobs. We're now going to see AI take over senior leadership levels, your management, administration, legal, medical, architecture, engineering, software engineering, traffic, safety, logistics, operations, finance, financial markets. We're going to see broad level impact of AI across dozens of different industries. And that's going to have a huge impact, not only on the social disruption, but you now have huge economic issues because of government deficits. The biggest portion of our government budget comes from the middle class. And if you start slashing away at the income of the middle class, you're going to have serious budget issues at a time when our tax laws are basically favoring the rich rather than the middle class. So we're going to have some economic issues that are going to come up with unemployment, housing, bankruptcy, social unrest. And these are going to be, I think, the more challenging issues to deal with, because our governments are generally unprepared for this, both economically and with programs to basically retrain people to for this transition. Now, I've seen some pundits basically say, well, we'll just move to a different type of economy. We'll have guaranteed basic income for the larger parts of the population. I don't know how they plan on paying for that based on the current tax plans, where we're having trouble paying for the things we've already committed to. And so I think that those are really going to be the more serious issues that we'll have to grapple with first. And as we go through that difficulty that will be global, it won't just be one country. Every country is going to go through this. It's also happening at a time when we're having major demographic changes. So we've got aging populations and workforces all around the world, from China to India to the US to Europe. Some countries are going to be worse off than others and are already experiencing the difficulty. Italy is a great example. Italy, the reason why people can buy houses for $1 in Italy is because their population is shrinking and their economy is shrinking. And there's no young people who have jobs who can buy those homes. And so Germany's going to be next down the line. France will be a little bit better off. Spain will have some difficulties. The United States will be better off because of our immigration policies, ironically. But countries like China will be starting to retract. India will take over some of what China is doing now. So even on a global level, we're about ready to see some major shifts to the stability we've seen in the post-World War era. And so that's going to raise disruptions as well. So whenever you have a time of chaos like that, you're going to have not only people being afraid, in some senses needlessly, because there's not much they can do. And then you're also going to have people taking advantage of it in malicious ways. So for people, what I try to counsel people, I say, first off, I said, don't be afraid of the technology. It's just technology. I liken it to when we had desktops first put into the enterprise. I was in business when there was not a single computer on any desk in a major corporation. And then we had 6 computers, and they were all given to executive VPs, mainly to their assistants, because they were so expensive. We certainly couldn't get it to a regular person, except neither the VP or the assistant ever had the time to figure out how to use it. I came along and started showing them what we should be doing with these things and building applications for the business to implement these things. But we're going to see, I saw an entire floor on Wilshire Boulevard of 300 people basically get squeezed down to 30 people in the accounting group, because we brought in computers that can do the job of that many people. And so the people who were good at learning these weird little contraptions called personal computers were the people that tended to stay on to their jobs the longest, because those were the new skills that they needed to have in addition to understanding finance and accounting.
But do you
And
think that,
so we're going to see a similar trend. We're going to see a trend of lots of layoffs, and the people who embrace the technology to learn the AI tools that are coming out in your industry are going to be the people that are going to last longer. And right now, there are well over 500 AI applications on the market. Many of them you'll never hear of, you've never heard of, and many of them will fall away. So we're going to see a similar consolidation of some of these products that we saw in the early stages of the computer industry. And we're going to go through a similar cycle. There's going to be incredible, unheard of levels of productivity advances. And then there's going to be difficulty because you're now going to need far fewer people to do the job than we used to have. And we don't really know what to do with those people.
but do you think, Guy, that it all starts with how, let's say in high school or counselor, like career counselors, will be able to tell to the students in college, hey, you know what? Be careful with this major because it will disappear eventually because of AI. I would recommend you to do something else or to find another career that may be a bit more profitable or that could work with AI technology.
Absolutely. It starts at college, at high school and college. A lot of kids are confused now, not only because of the social issues going on and the political issues, but they're trying to worry about their career too. Is what kind of career can they go into that won't be subject to being replaced?
Okay.
And that's a very difficult challenge for them. And as I said, sometimes it's less of choosing the career that you want as much as combining with that career the skills to learn how to use the AI tools appropriate for that career.
Okay.
And so, yes, I think it definitely is an issue, but you're going to get a lot of middle age, men in their 30s and 40s and 50s and women as well, who are suddenly without work and a little old to try and go back and learn some of those AI skills that they've been avoiding.
What do we
So
what do
there
we
will be some disruption.
So what do we do with those, I would say those Generation X or older or baby boomers? Uh, does the government will have to place them into something that can be more, I would say, catering to their knowledge and be able to kind of add some continuing education to help them acquire the knowledge that they need to be able to become more productive in this new technology? Or do they say, you know what, hey, you're on your own. We got nothing to do with it.
Well, during the last cycle, pretty much people were on their own, right? The government didn't really participate in broad level computer training. It was offered in schools and offered other places. There were opportunities for people to go learn. But only the people who really wanted to, who really felt aggressive about it, learned. And the rest of us kind of learned because of peer pressure that, well, every family on the block has got an Apple computer. I guess we got to get one. But they played games with it rather than actually learning how to use it. And so, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of there's going to be a lot of individual initiative that's going to have to come along with this. And I don't know that the government is ready to put together broad programs when we can barely put together the programs and pass a budget based on what we've already got. So we're entering this phase of needing to retool the entire economy at a time when government's sort of maxing out and huge deficits and political suicides and sabotage and dysfunction, where we're not really functioning at a political level well enough to really go after this retooling in a systematic, holistic, and united way. So that creates a danger. It's not that we can't. I don't think any of this is unachievable. I don't think any of this is unsurmountable. I think all of this is we can solve. We have all of the technologies, the resources, the financial resources, the human resources to solve all of these human problems, from hunger to housing to education to jobs. We don't now because of our political divide, our tribalism, and some of the more human issues that keep us from moving forward.
Mhm.
And so it's those human issues that I worry more about, and it's the human issues that I believe that could get amplified by AI that could be the most dangerous. So I try to steer the fear away from the technology in and of itself, although to be honest, we really don't know what's going to happen when we have a super intelligence that might be conscious. And if AI is learning from patterns, won't it learn from the pattern of our own behavior? Won't it learn that humans have a fundamental tendency towards deception and lying and greed and tribalism and talking about peace while we build weapons of war? And what will AI learn from watching and observing us as a species? And then how will it then tend to reflect back at us? We don't know. Now we can try to build in some sort of guardrails and moral guardrails, but I guarantee that there are very few companies, if any, that are making any serious efforts at training operational artificial intelligence with emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
And
that's the biggest challenge. You're right. But if we're
right, training alpha male AIs.
yes, but if we're
And
feeding AI with information about mistakes that has been done based on our human decision, can AI formulate the best outcome or the best case scenario, or is it not equipped yet to do so?
AI certainly could help us solve some of the more intracted problems that we have that maybe we haven't been able to solve. The question I have is, will we be able to implement the solution that it comes up with? We've known about climate change for 40 years, and we've been kicking the can down the road for regulation for 40 years because of the financial interest of corporations to avoid trying to do so. And so we have a similar problem with AI, which is, are we prepared in our governments, in our social society to really embrace this technology and gain more benefits than detriments out of it? And right now we're kind of in that cusp. We're on that event horizon where we don't really know what these changes will bring. And within the next 3 years, we know they'll bring major changes. We're just not sure we're ready yet. So
So
I think AI is a tremendously powerful, wonderful technology. It's also frightening and scary. And in order to get the most out of it, we have to move now to regulate, to control, and to put guardrails on it so that we can gain the benefits without the negatives.
beautiful. And for our listeners here, Guy, what book that you've written talk about those dangers of AI? I know that you have 3 books and you're writing on your 4th right now. So tell me which one is talks about the one that it's about AI.
Well, there's two of the 3 books I have out right now, Swarm and The Last Ark, both deal with artificial intelligence, quantum computing, consciousness, and weapon systems, and some of these major issues. The 3rd book, the Image, will come out probably later this year. I would start with Swarm, and just I think something your listeners might be interested in. Swarm started when I discovered, somewhat by accident, that a program had escaped the Lawrence Livermore Labs, the NSA spy labs at Sandia. When
Oh,
I figured out how a spy program could escape the NSA, that was their word, by the way, and why they designed it that way, they sent 2 FBI agents to my door.
oh,
So they were very upset that I had figured out something they thought was supposed to be top secret. I, on the other hand, was giddy, that because they confirmed my research by being there. And I pretty much told them that. I said, they didn't like my snarky attitude. So I took the snarky, I put it in the main character in the story. I took the program that escaped, I put it into the story as well as in the main character. So Swarm is a really great place to start, and it will start to introduce you to these issues that I'll be unraveling a little bit under each book.
and those books can be found on Amazon. Is that correct?
Amazon, GuyMorrisBooks.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, number of places.
Beautiful. We're going to have all the description of where they can buy the book. But on that note, Guy, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story about AI. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 22 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you're listening today. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.